Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. Today we're going to talk All-Star Weekend. We're going to talk about the G League Ignite potentially being no more and some first half or second half predictions. Now, though, let's hit the intro.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Way downtown. Bang! Bang! What is this going to be? Wow! Are you kidding me?
Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. But if you watch the tape, what you will see completely orchestrated this game. Yo, Bryce Simon is in the building. What's going on, buddy?
What's up, Sam? How are you doing? It's late here in Kansas. Just watched something. I guess it was a basketball game of some sort that we will talk about. Karl Anthony Towns dropped 50 again. And I guess we're going to dive all into it. No, I'm always excited. Rain, shine, time of the day, whatever basketball we have to talk about. I'm excited to talk hoops with you, Sam. So I'm excited to be here.
I'm much more excited to talk basketball with you than I am to watch that monstrosity of I can't even call it like a competition. I guess it was a game that was played. It was something. The Eastern Conference dropped 200 points. That's the first time anybody has cracked 200 in an all-star game. So that's something. I mean, this whole thing this weekend was such a mess. I think the NBA needs to do such substantial overhauling to this entire weekend that I can't even comprehend it in my brain right now. There was one thing that worked this weekend, and even that was overshadowed by Kenny Smith being a dipshit. Like, we're going to talk about all of it. Let's start with the game, though. The West scores 186. The East scores 211 points. By the way, the West, I think that's like the third or fourth highest point total ever in an all-star game. There has never been a more defense optional all-star game than what we saw tonight. Damian Lillard wins MVP. He drops 11 threes. Tyrese Halliburton has 10 threes. I don't know. Any thoughts on what we just saw?
No, I mean, it was what I was nervous was going to happen, was hoping wouldn't. And I don't know why I got my hopes up that we would see anything different, right? Like, we talked about this a few days ago. Maybe it was some of the stuff Adam Silver was saying. And after last year, I thought the guys would take it serious. I wonder what would have happened if the game would have stayed close. I don't know if it was like late second quarter or something like that. You know, the East went on the East just couldn't, like, they shot crazy from three. And
it felt like the whole air got sucked out when they went on that run. And it was just like, okay, this is the vibe of what the rest of the evening's going to be.
And what they did was they just attacked the offensive boards. And as you can imagine, if you're not playing defense, you're not defensive rebounding. So they got attempts and they made threes. I think the issue I have, Sam, is I don't expect this game to be played in the 90s or even the 120s. But you can play more defense than this without even really putting yourself in much jeopardy. I'm not asking guys to go play with verticality at the rim and contest shots from behind. Everybody who has played the game at a certain level understands how to play a pickup basketball game without putting people in jeopardy of getting hurt. You don't undercut people. You don't, come at them from behind. Again, you don't contest certain shots, but you guard your man that's in front of you. You contest a jump shot without sliding under their feet. When your man cuts off the ball, you go with him. You jog or at least somewhat get back on defense. Like, you can do all of those things and make it somewhat more enjoyable to watch. And then you get to the last 8 minutes and you really get after it. Here's the other thing. The shooting display was kind of cool, but that stuff looks way better whenever there's 75% of defense being played. It doesn't even look cool. None of the dunks look cool whenever nobody's playing. You can't even have cool alley-oop plays or anything like that when the defense legit is just standing there. And so the All-Star game itself was a complete dud for me. I'm sitting here, and maybe this is overreaction right after, get rid of it. Like, if this is what it's going to be, and I feel like the players have spoken that they don't want it to have any interest in it being more than this, replace it, get rid of it, do something else. Because I personally, I wouldn't have watched it if I didn't have to record the pod with you. I'll be straight up.
Yeah. So here's the thing on this. The NBA made a conscious decision to make this their showcase thing post Super Bowl. That's the reality of what they did. They wanted this to be the thing that they showed the world, basically. Now that football is over, they wanted this to be their idea. They wanted this to be what everybody sees. If you are a general sports fan that watched All-Star Weekend on Saturday, the Rising Stars thing on Friday, truly, do you know what the thing was that I had the most fun with this weekend? The celebrity game.
Really?
Puka Nacua and Micah Parsons were like going off and playing hard.
That's the only thing I didn't watch. So now I'm like, man, do I need to go back and watch it a little bit?
Puka Nacua like was out there throwing down like serious dunks and looked like he wanted to be there. Like truly, he campaigned to be there on the McAfee show this week. They literally called Mike Foss from ESPN on the phone during the show, asked if Puka could be in the game. Mike was like, it's done. That's great. Puka's in. And then Puka came and played hard. Micah Parsons had like 37 and 15 or something. It was ridiculous. But I had more fun watching that than I did watching whatever we saw tonight. And I think that is a statement on just what, like, I'm not even sitting here saying everybody in that celebrity game was competitive. They weren't, but there were at least a couple guys that were going. You know what I mean? So for this to be the showcase item for the NBA after the Super Bowl, like they should feel like the NBA league office needs to seriously go back to the drawing board, because I don't want to sit here and say like the players should feel embarrassed. It's the culture that has been wrought for them for years upon years at this point. And I would love to see them care more. I would love to see them play harder, but they've been indoctrinated into this at this point where it doesn't matter. So why should anybody care is my point. And it's such a disappointment. This is such a potentially huge weekend where the NBA can like really convert eyeballs in such a substantial way post Super Bowl, post NFL season. And I think if anything, they turned people off of the NBA after watching this. And it's a shame, because this is one of the most competitive NBA seasons that we've seen in a long, long time. And if this is like what the NBA is showing, it's just not indicative of what the NBA has been this season, which is what sucks. So if you're a general fan that tuned into the All-Star game, tuned in for, All-Star Saturday, I think you probably came away thinking that this is how the NBA is, and it's a bit disappointing.
I'm actually really interested. This is the one dynamic where me being a teacher kind of comes into play. I'm really interested to see how my students that are NBA fans talk about the All-Star weekend tomorrow. And I realize like that they're not a microcosm of like everybody, they're obviously not people our age and stuff, but just in terms of the next generation of fans. And can you get these kids to watch the games and all of that and keep them interested? I'm really interested to see what they say. If they're like, man, this was boring, we didn't like it. I'm interested to see what they thought was the coolest part of the weekend. It just gives me a perspective on some of those things. And I made this note in the outline. So I played junior college basketball, and one of my teammates was like, he was this ultimate hooper. Like, think about like the ultimate basketball, live, breathe, hooper, love the NBA, all of that. I saw on social media just before we started recording, he said this was the worst All-Star weekend he can remember. He doesn't even know if he wants to watch it next year. And I'm talking about like the true blood, love everything NBA basketball hooper type of person. And he was just checking. Like, for me, the only thing I enjoyed all weekend was the shooting, like the 3-point shooting display. Steph versus Sabrina was awesome. I didn't even mind, and I didn't have the broadcast on, so I didn't hear. I saw the tweets about what they were saying. I don't even have the context of what Kenny said or whatever. I just got to watch those two shoot and enjoyed that essentially on mute. And then I even thought the actual 3-point competition was okay. Like guys made shots. They had the tiebreaker. Dame hit the winner at the buzzer. That was about it for me that I actually can say I enjoyed.
Yeah. So I went to the Melbourne United Illawarra game.
Yeah, I saw that
during the All-Star Saturday. And then like I went back and watched it. It's very easy to go back and like, honestly, just cut that event in a third in terms of like the amount of time you have to spend on it. I had so much more fun at the Melbourne Illawarra game. Like I can't emphasize that enough. That was a competitive basketball game that was like 87-84 or something like that with a minute left. And it was a blast. There was two teams that are going to be in the finals this year. I don't care that the basketball was not NBA level. It was cool seeing teams give a shit, point blank. And it felt like this weekend, nobody gave a shit, except for Stephen Curry and Sabrina Ionescu. That was by far the coolest thing that happened all weekend during All-Star. I had an absolute blast watching Sabrina and Stephen Curry for 10 minutes, like battle it out. I actually watched that like all the way through. Like I didn't like zoom fast. I didn't like just watch the clips of it or anything. I went back to the broadcast and like watched that whole thing because it just ruled.
Yeah.
It was a really fun moment where both of those people took it seriously and understood the gravity of what was happening, understood the moment, rose to the occasion in a real substantial way. Sabrina goes out, drops 26 that would have tied Damian Lillard, Halliburton, like all those guys for like the highest score on the men's side. It was fantastic. Like I loved that moment more than anything. Like shout out Sabrina Ionescu and shout out to Stephen Curry for taking it seriously, going in and being such an awesome ambassador for basketball as a whole. It could have gone one of two ways, right? Like not with Steph, Steph's going to be serious, but you hear the way that Kenny Smith talked about it. Oh, she should have shot from the women's line, like would have been more of a competition. That's such bullshit. And I love that Reggie Miller called that out in the moment. And it's the difference between growing up with a sister that was a fucking baller in Reggie, Cheryl Miller, arguably, if not like inarguably, the best basketball player on the women's side of all time, versus Kenny Smith. And I don't know what Kenny Smith's experience is with women that play basketball, but he sounded like shit, I thought, during that moment, and like came dangerously close to like, unfortunately, making that moment mean less than it did, which sucked.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing what like it happened the same weekend as Caitlin Clark, I guess, like doing what she did for Iowa. And I'm like, why can't we just celebrate? They're playing the same game. It is the same game of basketball.
It's the same game.
It's the same game. And it's beautiful. And that's what I loved. Peyton Sanford is a guy I really like. I saw a video of him going around on Twitter talking about Caitlin Clark because she cooked him like whenever they were in elementary school. And he talked about like just it was amazing. And he just talked about her like she was any other hooper. And isn't that the best way to talk about it? Like that is the way
100%.
we should talk about everybody that plays this game. That's how I want people to talk about if she decides she wants to play basketball someday. I hope that's how people will talk about my daughter in the same way as they talk about any other hooper or 3-point shooter or post player or whatever. And that's what Sabrina did. And she balled out. Like when she started, I was like, oh man. Cause I think she made like 8 of 10.
Oh, she made 4 or 5 on the,
4 or 5 on the
opening rack. Yeah. And her opening rack was her money rack.
Yeah. I was like, oh man, like she's good. And I read some quotes which she said, she's like, I practice shooting from the NBA line all the time anyway. So why does it need to change? So it was beautiful to watch it. Now I'm glad I had the volume off as I was watching it. To me, this is what the NBA should lean into. Get rid of the dunk contest. I had no interest in that. Get rid of the skills challenge. Nobody takes it serious. Ant Edwards is out there shooting with his left hand. Again, if he doesn't want to do it, then just don't do it. But that kind of rubbed me. They didn't even know how they were supposed to dribble around they're not cones, but whatever they had set up on the court.
The like body thingies.
They had the court showing them, Sam, like how to weave in and out. Just have competitions like this. I saw someone say, bring in the quote unquote old timers and have them do like a retired, like JJ Redick versus Reggie Miller versus whoever versus whoever, I'll watch that.
Yep.
Bring in Caitlin Clark with Sabrina for Steph and Dame. I will sign up for that all day, all night.
100%.
Just lean into this is my answer.
There's so much within women's basketball that the NBA could showcase. Obviously has like a significant partnership with the WNBA, and there's just so many pieces of it that are worth showcasing in an environment like this. And I would love to see more of it. Like, honestly, like I'd be for Caitlin Clark if that's the move they want to do. Go for it. There are so many fucking outstanding WNBA players involved.
For sure.
Asia Wilson to Kelsey Plum to, like, if you want to get Candace Parker in there, like, is a like older legend of the game who's like a certified going to be Hall of Famer. I'm all for everything with that. Please, whatever you want to do, like I'm all for getting them involved, but get them involved because there was a seriousness to that event that did not permeate the rest of the evening. I mean, Scotty Barnes was like losing the ball on the skills challenge.
Yeah.
And like you said, Anthony Edwards was shooting left-handed. The dunk contest, like how many times can we jump over somebody or use somebody as like a projectile using your off arm to try and dunk and get higher up? Like I'm not sitting here, I'm fucking 5'9". Like I'm not gonna, talk to anybody about dunking and creativity with dunks, but come on, like we gotta figure out something with the dunk contest, because that was just, it was kind of dull. Like the shooting competitions I thought were way more intriguing than anything we saw in the dunk contest. And like the judging in the dunk contest was insane. Like it was clear they were trying to get Jaylen Brown to stick around as long as they could. Like the dunk that Jacob Toppin threw down, it was like a reverse like 360 or whatever. And they gave Jaylen Brown like a higher score for jumping over Kai Sennett. Like,
did you know who that was? Because I still don't know who that is. Like, he's a YouTuber or something.
I've seen his name come up vaguely on my Twitter algorithm. I'm not going to sit here and say that like I know who he is, but maybe that's just me being an old at this point. But I'm like not that old. And like Jeffrey Chan brings up in the comments, like Kenny questioning the Mexico tribute from Jaime Jaquez, like that happened too.
I'm so glad I didn't.
Kenny was like out of his mind.
All-Star. Because we went to a friend's house, and before we went over, I said, like, just so you guys know, I need to watch this, but we had the volume down because we were chit-chatting, eating supper, doing our thing or whatever. So it sounds like I didn't miss out on much not having the broadcast on.
Yeah, no, it was something, man. This was a colossal failure for the NBA this weekend, given the stakes of getting the post Super Bowl eyeballs. Like I don't think it's unfair to call that a colossal failure. I really don't. It sucks, and I hate having to be as blunt about that, but this is a weekend that has an immense amount of opportunity. If I was the NBA, I would move the All-Star game back toward like maybe late January, somewhere in that ballpark, and then have the trade deadline fill the post Super Bowl window, because I feel like people care about that more than they do about All-Star. I feel like that would be able to hold the headlines for the NBA, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, even if you wanted to extend it to a Friday, than whatever the fuck we saw over the course of this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, you could put it in that the weekend in between conference championships for the NFL and the Super Bowl, right? There's always a 2-week break there, so you would have a weekend. But yeah, I mean, they had the show, Sam. Saturday night, I went through it, and there was no big college games to speak of other than the Colorado USC game, which was a really, really good game that I watched today. And if you are an NBA draft person, you need to go check that one out, because you got to see Isaiah Collier and Cody Williams and KG Simpson, Tristan Silva, all of those guys. And then again tonight, there was nothing else on. I mean, there were no, like, the Purdue game had already been played. There was nothing competing against it. College basketball, NFL's over. Haven't really got into NFL draft stuff crazy yet. And it was like, it couldn't hold people's attention. It just couldn't, because it's not a very good product right now, or I should say anymore. And so it's sad. Like, I wanted to enjoy
Yeah.
it. I felt like I went into it with an open mind. I have my notes, and like you can see in the doc, like I'm trying to make something out of it, Sam. I have the first quarter score, and I'm talking about, oh, there's an 8-0 run here, and like, and it
Guys,
just
Bryce did 2 pages of notes on All-Star Weekend. That's how engaged he was. And by the way, Krapinski is telling us that we need to say Kai
I
Sennett's
saw
name one
that.
more time for the algorithm. So shout out Dave. Yeah. No, like this is where we're at with the All-Star Weekend. It's disappointing. It sucks. Like we need to make some serious, significant adjustments. Like Zangerstein brings up everything was diminished because the media and commentators have diminished the games itself for so long now. I don't think it's that. I really don't. I don't think it's a matter of people not caring about the games. I think the season is so long that it's hard to care about individual games specifically, but I struggle with it, man. I really, really do. I don't think this feels like a moment where the NBA just doesn't put enough of a priority on it for what it could be, or you could realistically try and do something different where maybe you do like the whole weekend being like rising stars. Maybe you do the old versus young. Like that was fun. The idea of old versus young, but people have to come in and make it serious. I saw somebody in the YouTube comments, and I'm sorry for who it was, that it was during the last week that we did our thing on All-Star prepping for it, said like, give a defensive player of the game award and like give like a $500,000 bonus for defensive player of the game in the All-Star game. Like you might at least get a couple of guys that like gun for that, and that could make it a little bit more interesting. But like that's kind of embarrassing that you have to put something forward like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wonder if you had a couple guys that would push the envelope, if everybody else would follow. And I just don't know, if we saw it a little bit in the Rising Stars, because like McClung and Alondis Williams were,
honestly, the G League guys, like truly,
yeah.
the G League guys like went for it.
And then obviously the hometown guys always go. So like that's why Benedict Mathurin is doing what he was doing, is because he was playing that, and like that got a little bit interesting there for a while because he's talking trash to Jay Ivey and all of that, and so
he bet 25K on a free throw. Let's do that stuff in the like I'm for it. Like you want to rope in like betting companies to the NBA All-Star game. Have like a couple of guys that are going to get to the free throw line. Just start betting on like free throws. Have guys start betting on how many points they're going to score. Like that's like going to be really hard for books to legislate. And I do not want to go down the road of that necessarily in terms of having to have them figure all of that out. I'm well aware of what the issues would be there. I mean, like Anthony Edwards told everybody he was going to shoot left-handed in the skills challenge, and like people still bet on Anthony Edwards' team for some ungodly reason. But we got to do something. Like we got to do something to bring interest back into this thing.
So Bryant says, don't understand this conversation essentially to get out of it. Not if that is truly it. If it's just about injuries, then don't play the game. Let's get rid of it. And again, here's my thing. And I never even came close to playing at that level, Sam, but I played a lot of basketball in my day, and I played at a fairly high level. I feel like people understand how to play a quote unquote pickup exhibition game in a way that can be competitive, entertaining, fun, but not put anybody at risk. Now, is there always a risk? Absolutely, right? You can still land on somebody's ankle. You could have a non-contact knee injury, but you could do that in practice or any sort of scrimmage or whatever. Like I understand there's some inherent risk, but I think you can make that very, very small, playing the way we all kind of understand how you play pickup games by not challenging guys. We're not saying challenge guys at the rim, Sam. We're saying navigate a screen every once in a while. Stay in front of your man. Get back on defense instead of having every transition 5-on-2. Maybe get a box out. Those type of things is all I'm asking for. I'm not asking for a game in the 100 to 110. I'm saying, can it be 146 to 152 and the last 6 minutes are, LeBron and Giannis going at each other. I feel like that's what the All-Star game used to be. Maybe I'm misremembering. Like maybe I've built that in my head.
Defense was never a like serious thing in the All-Star game necessarily, but like I'm trying to think which one it was. Was it like the New York one in Madison Square Garden? Like I feel like the one where Russ won MVP, like that was a pretty good one for some reason. Like I feel like that was like a close, fun game. The one with the what the hell was it? I think it was like maybe like 2018 or something like that. They had like LeBron, like I think picked the team or whatever. And then on top of it, he goes out and wins MVP. It was the year, you know what year it was? It was the year that Fergie sang the national anthem and like everybody made fun of it because Draymond was like laughing at it. That year was like a really good game, if I remember correctly. And again, like these games were like in the 150 zone, like 140 to 150 zone. So it's not impossible to do this. I swear to God, like you can do this on some level.
So real quick, just starting in 1990, 17-point game, 2-point game. Here was a 40-point blowout. But the next year, 3-point game that went to overtime, 9-point game, 27-point game. So there's some mixed in here, but there's an 11-point game, a 1-point game in 2001, a double overtime game that was played 145, 155 in 2003, 4-point game the next year, 10 the year after that, 2 the year after that. Like, again, it doesn't need to be in the 90s or the hundreds. And I realize there's a lot of threes. And I think one thing I did take away from this is like, man, the skill level is just stupid, Sam. Like the fact these dudes are making the shots they are, whether they're uncontested or not, still is pretty impressive. But you put a hand up, you contest, you rebound a little bit, etc. You don't give up wide open layups because you at least go with your man when he cuts. And it's going to cut down on a little bit. And again, I just think it looks more impressive when there's 75% defense being played as opposed to 25%.
You know what? The first year of the Elam ending, the 2020 year, someone mentioned that. Zangerstein in the YouTube comments mentioned that. That's right. That was a really, really good year, the 2020 year. Honestly, like maybe they need to bring back the Elam ending, but it wouldn't have helped this year. Like wouldn't have been a thing that mattered this year.
Because for a while they did the quarters thing too, right? Like they reset the score after every quarter or something. Weren't they doing that for a little while?
That was kind of weird too. I mean, I don't know. It's you really just need these guys to like sit down and play defense, I think on some level. That's the reality of it. Someone else had a comment here. Oliver in the comments brought up NHL skills challenge would be a great model. Yeah, like fastest skater, hardest slap shot, things like that. Like that's fun. I'm here for it. Like do things like that and get all of the people involved on All-Star Saturday. Like I'm for that on some level. I mean, I just think that we're so far from a competitive atmosphere in this thing that it's disappointing.
It is. Yeah. Like I said, I went in with a very open mind. I'm taking notes. I'm invested. Got to be able to talk about this stuff with Sam on Sunday night. And it was like, man, it just did not live up to it other than, again, and I just one more time here, Steph versus Sabrina was awesome. More of that. And like you said, include all of these WNBA players. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm fully invested in the WNBA season and roster and all of that. But I know there's a ton of talent there that get it involved however you can, because that was amazing. And yeah, as Ryan S. says, king of the court just has to happen. I don't know if you could convince the players to do it, but I know it'd be a lot of fun.
I also agree. I think it would be a lot of fun. All right. Next up, Adam Silver made some interesting comments this weekend regarding the G League Ignite. The G League Ignite is in the midst of a truly disastrous season this year. They, I think, have won like 1 or 2 regular season games. They are a truly difficult team to watch at times. Do you think that's fair, Bryce?
That's fair. Yes.
Yeah. Adam Silver was asked about it this weekend at All-Star. From what I know, outside of Dink Pate, is anybody signed to the Ignite program next season? I'm actually not sure.
I'm not sure about that either.
Regardless, Adam was asked. He said, I'm not sure what the future of Team Ignite will be because before there was a hole in the marketplace that we thought we were filling before doing that. And now my focus is to turning to the earlier development of those players. If you're seeing now what we're seeing in terms of that close to 30% of the league are players born outside of the US, it's clear that the development is very different in many of those programs outside of the US. More of a focus on practice, less of a focus on games, which seems to be the opposite of many of the youth programs in the United States. I think that now we've begun discussions with the NCAA. The vast majority of the top players play in college and never play in the NBA, of course. So we have a common interest in just improving the game, developing players. There's no question they're coming into the league incredibly skilled, but that doesn't necessarily translate to being team basketball players. And then what I'm hearing from some of these same coaches that may be complaining about inability to play defense is that these players are not as prepared as I'd like them to be, particularly as very high draft picks. So I think there's an opportunity for us to be a part of the community that's developing players, elite players, and also, as I mentioned before, in terms of increased participation numbers, of just us being a more active participant in getting kids active, boys and girls, with our junior NBA and junior WNBA programs. That's what Adam had to say about this. I think it represents such a fundamental misunderstanding of what the problem is with the Ignite right now. I think it represents such a baseline, like almost like silly way to go about it. Like, it seems like Adam Silver's, and I made this, if you're watching on YouTube, I made this very simple graphic using the underpants gnomes from South Park. It seems like his first idea in the youth development of American players is get the NBA involved. And then he has no idea what to do in the middle of it. And then phase 3 is going to be profit, right? He has such a fundamental, I think, misunderstanding of why guys struggle entering the NBA, point blank. And I really, really struggle with that. And Adam should not be involved on this level, in my opinion, in youth development within basketball. He has way too much other shit going on. And I think his ideas and I think his thought processes are not necessarily about profit. I think they're pretty noble in terms of he thinks that the rest of the world is catching up and that we should do better as a country in the United States of developing basketball players. I take him at his word. I truly think that everything about this is about him believing that the NBA can develop players better. Everything that I have seen from what their plans are and what Adam's comments have been just represent the most baseline rudimentary thing. Do you know why guys struggle with concepts entering the NBA, especially very high draft picks? Because NBA teams draft fucking teenagers. Do you know how hard it is to play in the NBA as a teenager? It's really hard. Getting these guys into where all of this is going is it seems like Adam wants to start United States like basketball academies like they have in Africa, like they have in China, like they have here in Australia. I think that's where it seems like this is all going. He wants to start academies for kids that are like 15 to, let's call them 18 years old, and then send them off to college and hope that that develops them better in some way, shape, or form. Okay, sure. I don't think that's a terrible idea. That's speculative. That's not me like having any, knowledge or intel on what Adam Silver is thinking. But all of these comments here in terms of they're coming into the league incredibly skilled, but that doesn't necessarily translate to being team basketball players. Sure, that's like AAU system to a T, right? Like I get that that's a real complaint. But then to say coaches are complaining about an inability to play defense. These players are not as prepared as I'd like them to be. You're drafting teenagers, guys. Like, you shouldn't expect them to be ready to go from the jump. It's hard to do that in the NBA. That's the reality. So I don't know, man. All of this, where are you sitting here as we kind of talk about this?
Well, no, I mean, I think it's very fair, right? Like, how are you going to expect any 18-year-old, 19-year-old, whatever it is, to come into the best basketball league in the world and be ready to play right away? So I think that's definitely part of it. Another part is like, you develop them then when they get into the NBA, right? Like I was thinking about this, like, you have every NBA team has many resources as they want. You could have a coach for every player, showing them scouts and film and breaking their game down and helping them grow and all of those type of things. And so, like, I get it. I understand it. I think my immediate thought when he talks about this, it goes to a level that's it's not as much of like the NBA track level, right? Like, I'm thinking about kids here where I live, my own kids who, yeah, I mean, I hope they aspire to be professional athletes someday or whatever. Maybe they don't even like sports. I do think we have a problem from what I see in it's way too much games and not near enough practicing, right? Like I do think what he said there, I actually agree with that. The idea of how a player, especially a young kid, gets better is off. And all kids want to do is go play games, and they go play these AAU tournaments, whatever type of tournaments, from the time they're in like first grade, and they play 5 games in 2 days, and none of them really matter whether you win or lose. And then you don't practice, and then you do it again the next weekend. I believe there's something fundamentally wrong with that and kind of flawed with developing an actual basketball player or football player, volleyball player, whatever sport it is. But even if we do it the other way, I don't know that kids are going to be ready, like you say, to come into the NBA and play right away because of the age they're in. The other thing, like, the college game is so different too, Sam. We talk about this all the time, like, they're playing in a different type of game than what they're going to hit in the NBA. So there's going to be an adjustment period for that as well.
100%. And I just really struggle with such rudimentary ideas being expressed. Do you know why the college game is a better developmental place right now than the G League Ignite? Has nothing to do with coaches, or has nothing to do with although I think it does have something to do with coaches, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the Ignite specifically. Has nothing to do with anything like that. It's that they're competing for something.
Yeah.
You have guys and coaches particularly that are trying to get these kids to compete for something specific. They have a goal, and they're trying to win basketball games. They're trying to teach these kids to win. With the Ignite, it's all about development, and nobody gives a fuck if a team in the G League wins or loses. That's the reality of the situation. So when I look at this, I think it's so much more baseline than what Adam Silver seems to believe. And like, if he wants to start academies like across the United States, like 2 or 3 of them, cool. I think it would be fine for that to be involved. I don't know that they would be any better or worse at developing NBA players than Oak Hill is, or whatever, Montverde, whatever high level academy that has like good coaching staffs, Sunrise Christian, Link Academy, like whatever one that you want to pull out in the NIBC, right? The ones that do like a good job, in my opinion. You can point to those. I don't know why the academy system would be better or worse. I just think Adam Silver thinks that the NBA is like the pinnacle of all of this in a way that it just kind of isn't necessarily, if you don't have that youth development system and that track record of hiring the right people involved. And this is where I think we can shift to the Ignite, because I think that's where the Ignite has gone wrong.
Yeah.
All due respect to Jason Hart, all due respect to like Sharif Abdur-Rahim, the people that like build those teams. I think that they just have made like fundamental miscalculations on who the right people are to develop these players into real NBA prospects. To me, the Ignite should continue to exist. I have no problem with the Ignite continuing to exist. I think it's reasonable to do so because not every kid wants to continue going to school.
Yep.
Like, that's okay. If you don't want to go to college, if that's not what your overall goal is long-term in life, is attending a university, I get it. It's cool. Like, I would hope that they understand all of the benefits that a degree can have, but some people just, it's school is not for them.
Yep.
And I think the Ignite, I think the NBL Next Star program, those kind of options are great, even with the advent and the implementation of name, image, and likeness rights within college sports, allowing these guys to make money above and beyond, even frankly, what the Ignite and what the Next Stars program is offering. So I'm all for these things. It's just the execution has been so bad to this point in terms of putting these kids in a proper position that I just don't think we know one way or another if it's been good or bad. And like, I have stats, like we're going to bring up another slide here momentarily in terms of who's been helped, who's been hindered by this program. And we're going to go player by player and like really break it all down. But I really think the fundamental issue here is it's been an execution error more than a this program shouldn't exist error, and it's no longer filling a gap in the marketplace that exists.
No, I think that's good because I think somebody I don't know if Silver brought up NIL himself or something like that. And I'm like, no. Like, there's still kids that don't want to go to class, and I'm glad you brought that up because, again, out here where I teach, we talk to kids all the time. Like, yes, you want to go be a doctor, you want to go be a lawyer. Like, that stuff's great. Some kids want to be mechanics. They want to be electricians. They want to be linemen, like stuff like that. And you go to a trade school. You don't have to go get a 4-year degree to be successful in life. And college, like that isn't for everybody. And so I love, this is different than whenever I came up, almost 20 years ago now, where you have all of these options to go continue playing and it doesn't have to go the college route. And I think it's awesome. I think it's amazing they have these choices to make. And because of that, because there are kids who may not go to a 4-year university and be successful in that environment, they should have these options for like the G League Ignite or, the Next Stars and even OTE and those different things. But I'm with you, and I wrote it in the notes. I said development was my first thing, like kind of what should the motivation be? And then the more I thought about my notes today, I'm like, hold on, I need to add more to that because it's not just about development. And you hit on it earlier. You have to put them in an environment where they can develop and be evaluated and improve and grow. And that comes from competitive basketball. How many go through their schedule this year, Sam? How many games have they lost by 50? You can't evaluate, you can't improve, you can't get better in those type of situations. And so that's where they've completely messed this up. I think they bring in too many. I think they're trying to balance too many players at one time.
Yes. And this year was the worst with that particularly.
Agreed. Like this, we talked about it how many months ago, right? Like, how are they going to, get all of these guys on the floor? They haven't put the right guys around them, in my opinion. Like, why does this team of all teams not have a true veteran type point guard to run the show and set up Ron Holland in his spots, set up Matas in his spots, set up Almanza in his spots, etc.? So I think those would be my couple things is you can't bring in 6-7 guys in 1 year. I just don't think you can prioritize all of those players at one time. And you have to build a team around them that makes sense and is competitive. You have to be competitive when you're playing, like you said, competitive games night in, night out. Whenever you're playing for something, you develop naturally in those situations. There's just something about it when you're preparing that way. And right now they haven't been able to navigate that with the Ignite.
Yeah. So you said 50 and it's not 50, but they've legitimately lost 1/3 of their games this season by 20 points or more.
Yeah.
Which is just like truly like non-competitive. in terms of like game time and game atmosphere. And then beyond that, they've even lost like a couple of games by like 18 in addition to that, right? So it's a real problem. They went 4-12 in the showcase games. They went 2-19 to this point in the regular season. Ron Holland is going to miss the rest of the G League season at this point with, I believe, a thumb injury, right?
I think it's the thumb, yeah.
So that's not ideal. It's just not working in the way that they hoped. And to me, it's an execution issue. I think that they don't put these kids in positions to succeed in much the same vein that you said. You need to have like a real point guard. The best, I said this in the summer, the best thing that they could have done was pay Frankie Ferrari like $500,000 or Jacob Gilliard like $600,000. Gilliard's like in the NBA, so like, you know, probably not as much as he could have made, but pay these guys real substantial money, because those guys are going to get players involved and they're going to get them real chances to make to get the ball in spots where they can be successful, instead of having like Ron Holland having to create across the court all the time, instead of having Matas have to create in half court when he just like kind of can't do it yet. There are a lot of different ways that you could go about it. Sign a real big that knows how to play defense. I thought like the Amir Johnson stuff early on was like valuable for them, like when he could really play. The other piece of this that I think is really important, and this is where we're going to dive into it, the track record on guys in the Ignite program has not been very positive in terms of helping lift their draft stock. And part of it is because when I talk to NBA evaluators, they just don't have it's complicated. Evaluating the Ignite context is very complicated. This year, everybody is like incredibly disappointed with it because they just aren't playing like great, real, schematically coherent basketball. Like they take basically no threes because they don't have any shooters outside of John Jenkins. They don't have great defensive consistency and competence because they have so many young guys out there. They needed, if they were going to have like 8 or 9 young guys like they have currently on this roster, they needed to be able to have like probably be able to stagger them, like have Ron Holland play a game, then Modest plays a game, have like 3 of them in the lineup at once instead of like having games where they have like 6 of them in the lineup at once. And then having young guys like surrounded by vets at all times, right? And guys that can like actually play a little bit. And I get that that's not the easiest thing in the world in the G League. But nonetheless, like there are ways to go about it that have not been good this year. But even going back through history, right? So let's talk about this. Guys that have legitimately helped their stock, and we're going to go player by player here. In 2021, they had 5 guys: Jalen Green, Jonathan Kuminga, Isaiah Todd, Dacian Nix, Kai Sato. Jalen Green, you know, I did this preseason rank here by averaging John Gavoni and I's preseason ranking for these guys on our first mock drafts, like in the summer, right? I don't mean to like be a dickhead, but like John and I have been the standard here momentarily for a minute in terms of projecting the draft correctly, right? If you go back through like the last 5 or 6 years, like it's ours that has been the most successful. John and Jeremy beat me last year, and I think I finished second. The year before that, I finished first. The year before that, I think I finished first. John beat me like the 2 years before that. Like you can go through and like I've had a year where I finished like 5th or something when John finished that. So like I'm not sitting here and saying I get it right all the time, but I think if you look through, John and I have probably been the closest. In the preseason, we had I think John had Jalen at 2 and I had him at 3. He ends up at 2. I don't think Jalen like helped or hurt himself in the Ignite program. I think it was just a year where he kind of rolled with it. Jonathan Kuminga, I think that John had him at 6 or 7 and I had him at 5 coming into the year. He ends up going 7. I think he kind of slipped a little bit.
Yeah.
I would say that the overall thought on his game was not quite as positive as what it was at the beginning of the season. Isaiah Todd at 2021 as well. John and I had an average rank of like 52. We both had him like late second round. He ends up going 31. I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't talk to any other team that year that had him that high. Like, all well and good for the Wizards to have taken him that high. I'm glad for Isaiah Todd that he got that much money. I really wonder where it would have fallen to if he hadn't been taken there. I have a lot of questions on it. I don't really think that Isaiah Todd helped himself much in that G League season. And if you go and you look at the numbers, they weren't amazing. You know what I mean? It's not like Isaiah Todd went out and really truly helped himself that year. That year with the Ignite, his stats were, I think here, let's see. He played 15 games. He averaged 12 points, shot 43% from the field, had a 1-to-2 assist to turnover ratio, and averaged 4.9 rebounds. I don't think he really helped himself. I think the Wizards just took him very high. And when I talk to teams, I don't think that was quite where they were on him, if I'm being honest. Is that unfair to not count him as a win?
No, I think that's fair. I mean, we know how this works, especially when you get into the second round. Things can get all over the place. A team pinpoints a guy and they, hey, it's a second round pick. Even at 31, 20 spots higher than 52, we're still going to take him. I also I feel like at one point, I feel like Kuminga's quote unquote fall. I realize it's only one spot, but I remember that almost being like a 5-player draft at one point. It was like a big 5 of Cade, Jalen, Mobley, Barnes. And then all of a sudden we got to draft night and Suggs got ahead of him and then Giddey got ahead of him as well. So I thought Kuminga's was somewhat significant, even if it only, and I wasn't doing this exclusively back then, so I could be misremembering, but even though it only looks like it's 1-2 spot fall, I felt like that was somewhat almost like he dropped a tier, even though maybe the number of spots doesn't seem that significant.
I think that's a reasonable way to put it. Dacian Nix dropped from a preseason borderline lottery guy to undrafted. And part of that is he put on a lot of weight in the pandemic, it seemed and lost some of his explosiveness. I don't know if I totally blame the Ignite for that. That is really, it could just be a product of circumstances there. But having said that, this was a lottery guy that went undrafted, and that's a bad look, frankly.
Yep.
He was the number 1 point guard in his high school class, and maybe everybody was wrong. And I think it's not unfair to say we were all wrong, but they didn't exactly keep up their end of the bargain. And Kai Sato, I don't give any, one way or another. Kai was never really on the NBA radar, realistically. Apologies to Philippine fans. And ended up being undrafted and has never played in the NBA. I'm not going to sit here and go one way or another with Kai Sato.
Yep.
2022.
This is an interesting one.
Jaden Hardy falls way off the board. He goes from top 5 into the second round. That is arguably the biggest drop that you will see here. I think there's actually a case for one that is more disastrous for the Ignite, but Jaden Hardy going from a top 5 pick to being what he is and going in the second round, that is catastrophic for the G League Ignite to me. That is the one that is crazy.
Yeah, and the only thing that saves that year is the next 2 you're about to bring up, right? Or I think we would have talked about it more.
People bring up Dyson Daniels as a win. I think Dyson was successful in spite of the Ignite. Sure. Because if you remember, they let Jaden Hardy rock with the ball for months on end.
Yep.
And Dyson was the better point guard that year. The NBA agreed that Dyson was the better point guard that year. And they didn't really position Dyson in the way that was possible. And oh, by the way, John and I had him late lottery. He went late lottery.
Yeah.
Second half of the lottery, right? I think Dyson stayed steady more than anything. I don't think he genuinely lifted himself from one tier to another by being with the Ignite.
Grape 8 brings up interesting. Like you would watch those games and you would see Dyson Daniels really guard. And so it was like, it almost made it stand out even more, right? Like, hey, here's this kid who's showing that you can guard in the G League. And so it's almost like by being in a bad environment and playing defense the way he did, like amplified it even more to your eyes whenever you watch an Ignite game. And so I think it, in a weird roundabout awkward way, it actually helped him in terms of standing out on that end of the floor, at least.
That's right. I don't think he like helped himself necessarily by doing the Ignite though. It's kind of my take on Dyson.
Yeah.
Marjon Beauchamp undeniably helped himself.
Yeah.
He to me is the success story of the G League Ignite like trajectory to this stage. And I think he fits a model with the other guy that like has a chance to be like the major success story that we'll talk about from this season. Kind of a weird developmental pathway where he went from Chameleon BX, where like he decided to train to be a pro instead of doing college, and then went to Yakima Community College at the JUCO level. And then like I think it was like Mike Miller had him in for workouts and like called Sharif Abdur Rahim and maybe I forget who else was involved, maybe Rod Strickland as well, and told them to like come look at Marjon and workouts. Like we think he's a guy, and had Marjon, work out for those guys. And Marjon like proved to them, hey, like I can be like a interesting player. I'm a former top 50 recruit. I've taken this weird circuitous path. And then they got him with the Ignite. He was not a guy that anybody, myself, John, etc., NBA teams expected a ton of. And he came out and looked like a potential NBA player. We'll see where that goes. But for him to go from where he was to the first round, I think is an undeniable win for the Ignite in a ocean of losses for them.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, as I said, like his success story that year helps balance out the, like you could, I don't know. It's probably still a net negative, right? Whenever you add in the next guy you're about to talk about and you talk about a guy going from top 5 into the second round, it's not like Beauchamp ended up in the lottery from undrafted, but it's not quite the L just because of his individual performance. Dyson's a, steady Jaden Hardy drops the way he did. I'm also just kind of, as we go through this is probably the last group we can really kind of project out their careers. Like we've talked about Jalen Green, Kuminga's finally figuring it out. Hardy, I'm just trying to think where some of these guys are going to be in the next 2 or 3 years. Like people in the comments were bringing up, like judging them on their second contracts. And so I was just kind of looking at the path of some of these guys and where they're on in terms of that. Like, did it help them really, not just their draft stock, Sam, but just their path into the NBA and their success in the NBA? I'm not sure you can say it helped any of them in that way either. Not that we can foresee as we're looking at it right now.
2022 continued. Michael Foster goes from, potential second round pick to undrafted. Not a great situation there. Just didn't prove enough with the Ignite. Fanbo Zhang, was kind of an interesting take from the Ignite program. I didn't love that he went that route. I thought that he should have gone to Gonzaga. I thought it would have been like a better route for him at the end of the day. But like didn't help himself. I think he ended up signing like an Exhibit 10 maybe with Indiana, and I believe is now currently back in China, if I remember correctly. Yeah, he plays for Beijing in the CBA. I would argue that is 2 losses, a win, and 2 steadies. So I think overall that's like not a great situation, but not like that's by far their best year in my opinion.
Agreed.
Last year to me was like disastrous.
Sure.
For them. Scoot Henderson falls from number 2 to number 3. The entire pre-draft cycle, this was considered a 2-person draft. Victor Wembanyama and Scoot Henderson. And credit to Brandon Miller for making it a conversation. He lifted and elevated himself into the conversation in a real way. But the reason that he did that is because the Ignite in Scoot Henderson did not have a great season that year. And in my opinion, Scoot did not get great reps and competitive reps that year. By the end, he looked incredibly bored. And honestly, I thought he played like he was just trying to get through the season, like he was hurt. For Scoot to fall from number 2 to number 3 when the entire cycle from July 1st of 2022 until, let's say, March 1st of 2023 this is a 2-person Victor Wembanyama, Scoot Henderson draft. That is a disaster for the Ignite, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what I was saying about with Kuminga, right? It's not like you look at that, oh, he only fell one spot. It's way more than falling one spot, because that went from like, oh, Scoot versus Wemby to that became not even a conversation. And obviously, eventually, Scoot wasn't even hold on, to the number 2 spot. And I remember people would question all the time, what Scoot was doing in the G League, and this is against G League competition, and look at what people, obviously since I'm around the Pistons a lot, look what Saban Lee's doing in the G League, that he's putting up better numbers than Scoot Henderson and stuff like that. Like it didn't seem to hold weight to people as much as I thought it would, because like they're just like it just didn't hold weight, I guess is the best way I could say it, what he was doing. And you're right, he looked so disinterested a lot of that season. And it ended up, I don't know. I wonder what some of these guys you talked about, like Zine going somewhere else. Like, I wonder what some of these guys would have done. Like, is some of this bad decisions by the players looking at this program and going, okay, am I the right type of player to play in this situation, in this system?
Well, and I'm glad that you bring that up, because I think the next guy is a perfect encapsulation of that. Leonard Miller was kind of made to play in the G League. He is a grab and go big who can attack the basket, who can go in transition, who can really create opportunities. Leonard Miller had an outstanding season last season in the G League. And there is nothing wrong with him as a person. There are no like intel flags with Leonard. He is the epitome of somebody that should have helped himself. He went from being a borderline like top 20 guy to falling out of the first round.
Yeah. You were screaming from the rooftops. I mean, you didn't quite have him in the lottery, but you had him mid first round.
No, I had him in the lottery. I had him in the lottery.
So
by the way, I would still have that, to be clear. Leonard's been fantastic in the G League.
So do you think this comes down to like this class specifically? Like, it's not just people on Twitter not kind of respecting what was done. This all of a sudden becomes NBA teams looking at what these guys did with this team and saying, either we didn't get a great evaluation of it, we don't respect it. Like, respect's a strong word, but you know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't seem meaningful. Like, it seems like this is the class where that really stood out, where the NBA team said, yeah, Leonard, this was awesome. But in that context, we just really don't respect it, even though the numbers, like, because the last month or two, weren't his numbers something crazy? Like, I mean, he played really, really well.
Fantastic. He was fantastic. All of the tape was great. He worked out really well in front of teams before he had like a minor thing pop up where he wasn't able to like work out for the last like week and a half of the pre-draft cycle. There was nothing about his situation that said he shouldn't have been drafted in the first round. Nothing about his profile, at least. CD Sissoko falls from 30 to 44, whatever, goes from like end of the first round potential to mid second round. It's fine. Like, I don't know that it's going to matter. And then Mojave King goes from like 51, gets drafted 47, basically was where he was at the end of the day. This is a loss of a year. Like, truly. Yep. Scoot, Miller, Sissoko all drop in a real way. Then 2024 looks like the worst of them yet, because Ron Holland. So again, if you look at the preseason projections, he was probably the most likely guy to go number 1, I would say. I have him at like 6. I think John has him right around 6. Matas Buzelis, he was, preseason top 3. I would say his range is somewhere like 4 to 12 or so. Ethan Almanza, I had him too high. I had him at 2, which is part of why this is so high, saying that he was like a top 5 guy. Hand up, I was off on that. But John had him in the top 10. Like I wasn't alone on this. And right now he's not projected in the first round for either of us. Babacar Sane, I didn't have him mocked. John did. He's projected to go undrafted. It would be pretty stunning if he did get drafted. I did have Thierry Darlin mocked. John did not. Currently projected to go undrafted. Neither of us had London Johnson projected. The guy that is good that has helped himself is Tyler Smith. And again, a different pathway kid, turned pro immediately out of high school, went to OTE for 2 years and has come into the Ignite program and has been productive. There are still a lot of flaws. He is a really bad defensive player right now, but he is a tremendous shooter at 6'10", who is an athlete who can be productive and has some interesting features of his game that I think probably result in him going somewhere in the first round.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see where Tyler Smith lands because he is kind of what I would say like a prototypical like 4-man in the NBA with the way he can stretch the floor. He plays a lot of 5 with the Ignite as well. So, I mean, I guess that's something he can do also, but the defense has a long way to go. But we know floor spacing, especially from bigger players. I think he started to at least show some more defensive playmaking. Almanza is the one that's interesting to me where I'm trying to navigate, is this an Ignite problem or should have Almanza seen this and known that playing for the Ignite wasn't going to highlight his game the way it needs to be highlighted?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I think it's more that than anything because they just didn't have a good guard. And he's somebody that like needs service to be able to like play. And he's not an advantage creator. He is an advantage maintainer almost, or a finisher in that way where he can't like create a shot with a post up. He is, not going to drive an attack and score that way and take advantage of mismatches and things like that. He is like, you're in ball screens. He's going to roll into a post up, create a mismatch. He's going to short roll and have open space and then be able to drive or be able to pass and make the right read. I think that was probably a miscalculation on their part. But to me, it's a problem for the Ignite that a kid like that, it's a miscalculation.
Yeah. So that's what I wanted to say is Almanza and his team, whatever, they should have seen that and been like, man, this isn't the best scenario. But that's an issue if a potential first round pick can't come play for you because you can't put him in an environment to succeed because you don't have a point guard. In my opinion, Sam, all 4 of those guys at the top of the list there are guys that could really benefit from a table setter. I think Ron Holland needs some on-ball reps, but I truly think you get him off zoom action, off a pin down, something where something is created for him first, and then let him attack. Matas, I know he can do some things on ball, but again, how many catch and shoot can you get him? Some unguarded shots, attacking some closeouts. Tyler Smith, it absolutely falls into this category. And you just talked about it with Almanza. They don't have a point guard that does that. The other thing that I really disliked whenever I was watching Scoot film, they had no lob threat for him. Like I would always tell people, imagine Scoot with a guy that has real rim gravity that he can either throw it up to or holds the defender so he can get downhill a little bit better. So it's just this roster construction. I equated it in my notes, Sam, to the Detroit Pistons and the fact that you couldn't evaluate Cade, Jaden, Asar, Jalen Duren because the roster around them doesn't make sense. I feel the same way about Ron Holland, Matas Buzelis, Smith, and Almanza. I don't know how to properly evaluate them because I feel like the roster around them is so flawed. We haven't seen them in a role where they can really succeed.
So all told, looking through all of this history here, 9 guys maintained their status in some way. And by the way, within there, I'm including Babacar Sane, Thierry Darlin, London Johnson, Fanbo Zhang, Kai Sato, like 5 guys that, were late seconds to undrafteds, let's call them, projected and like maintained that, right? 10 guys that hindered their stock in some way during this season, and 2 guys in Marjan Beauchamp and Tyler Smith, guys that like had weird, unique track records and backgrounds, and then ended up kind of helping themselves throughout the process, elevating themselves during it. That's pretty horrendous, man. Like a 10-2 negative to positive run. That's tough. That's a bad look for the Ignite program.
So what would be interesting, and I don't know that we have time to do this, it'd be interesting to do this with a couple major college programs and, like the NBL or something like that, right? Just to see, is this kind of typical for a program in general? Like what is Kentucky's track record if we did this for the last 3 years? Like if we did it just this year with Kentucky, you would have the fall of Justin Edwards, but you would have a crazy rise for Reed and Rob. DJ probably fell based on where he was preseason.
I would say Aaron Bradshaw fell as well a little bit.
And so like, it would just be, I'm not discounting this at all. I just would be honestly, I'd want to see it for every major college program to see what programs are the best, right? We know if we went through it, we would find college programs where it would be similar to the Ignite. Don't you think? We would find some programs that have a history of.
So to me, the direct comparable more is the NBL, right?
Okay, sure.
Just off like the top of my head, like looking at a graphic here, right? All of LaMelo Ball, Alex Sarr, Josh Giddey, those guys like clearly helped themselves.
Agreed.
In terms of putting themselves in a better position. Honestly, I think Ousmane Dieng probably helped himself a little bit going in the lottery. I still don't love Ousmane Dieng as a prospect, and I wouldn't have taken him as high as Oklahoma City did, but I think he probably helped himself by going there and like hanging out for a year.
It worked.
It worked. I think Alex Tui has probably helped himself a little bit, like this year specifically now. I think Alex Tui is in a better position than what he was in the preseason. I think Bobby Klintman is like basically maintained.
Bobby's going to be an interesting, right? Like that. Yeah. If that's where he stays, then I think he did fine. Like I'm nervous that I have Bobby too high, but if that's where he ends up, then it was actually absolutely a fine decision.
Ariel Hookporty, I think, helped himself by doing the Next Stars program. AJ Johnson, I think, probably did not do himself favors, and Trenton Flowers probably did not do himself favors. Montas Rupstavicius, he, probably maintained. He's had a great season. Like, I don't think he hindered himself at all. And honestly, I think better of him than what I did coming into that program. But, John Gavoni, like John really liked him in the preseason. I could have just been missing something. I'm here to hear that out at the end of the day. I think that's a plausible outcome that I was too low. But realistically, I would say all of Sarr, Tui, Montas, Ariel Hookporty all helped themselves. Klintman probably stayed about the same or so. And then AJ Johnson and Trenton Flowers, the only two that fell. Like that's a good year for the Next Stars, right?
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing is like, do you think AJ and Trenton both stay in this class? Like AJ could go back and then come back and be a bigger, and here's my thing. And I realize this is just piling on now. I don't think either of those guys are increasing their stock if they're playing for the Ignite. Like I feel somewhat confident saying that. Like I don't think AJ goes and does that. Like honestly, like maybe in the OTE is where those guys should have went and played that way more free flowing and kind of just followed the path of the Thompson twins.
Yeah, look, I think like AJ was probably just not physically ready to play in the NBL personally. Sure. This is a physical league over here, and he is so skinny that like it would be hard. But truly, like this season, I would say even like just this season alone, 2 guys have like helped themselves like substantially in the Ignite program. And then you go back, like Giddey goes 6th overall. LaMelo Ball like was a total wild card when the Ignite took him.
Yeah.
Or when the NBL took him, and he ends up going in the top 3. Like there is just more of a track record of genuine success with the NBL Next Stars program than there is with the Ignite program. And I think it's like kind of inarguable, to be
And
honest with you.
here's the other thing. Like maybe this would have happened in college. We talked about Trenton Flowers a lot. They got him playing in the position that he needs to play to be successful if he's going to be successful as a professional, right? Like they went down there, they let him try it, it didn't work, then they moved him off. Like some of the games that I have watched, I kind of started to like a little bit of what he was doing. Like the shot still has to come and all of that, but I feel like they put him on the path to be an NBA player if he is going to be an NBA player.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the reality. That's what I've got on this. Do you have any other kind of like closing reactions as we kind of go to this a little bit?
No, like I said, I think we broke it down pretty good. And it just, again, I think I want to emphasize, and you brought it up first, is we're not saying get rid of the Ignite because it's an overall bad idea. I think the
Yeah.
pitch is do it better, right? Like put
Yeah.
the things in place, emphasize the things that need to be emphasized. And to me, that would actually be downsizing the amount of young talent you bring in. I don't think that they can prioritize 6 or 7 guys a year. I think you bring in 2 or 3, maybe 4, get them at different positions, get vets around them. You gotta have a point guard. You have to have a vertical threat big, maybe a pick and pop big, a 3-and-D wing that can do that. Pay the money to bring those guys in, and you're probably going to have to overpay for them, right? Like that may be part of it, but put all those resources in place to make it happen.
I think there's a better fix. I think you don't have the Ignite team, and I think you disperse these kids throughout the league. Do you know who the player is this season outside of Tyler Smith in the G League that has helped his stock more than any other player?
Malik Lewis.
Malik Lewis, currently playing for the Mexico City Capitanes.
Yep.
Malik Lewis, I think, has a real chance to get drafted. Like, I have him getting drafted currently in my mock.
Like
That's going to
58
go live.
or 59. Yep.
Exactly right. So the reason that Malik Lewis has helped himself is he's just playing in a role. They ask him to defend the toughest guy every night. They ask him to cut. They ask him to play off the ball, be able to do things like that. He has a simple role. He's big. He's 6'9", long arms, can move his body, like can do some things. That's what I think they should do with these kids. Now, I think what makes that tenable with Mexico City is that Mexico City does not have a parent team that is trying to develop other players. They have a real reason to give Malik Lewis some buy-in because they're a young team trying to grow, trying to build a fan base. Adam Silver has very clearly put some eggs, not a lot of eggs in the Mexico City basket, but like clearly I think sees it as a developing market that's interesting for an NBA team. I am really impressed with how they've gone about using him this season. And I think that might be a better strategy for developing these kids, dispersing them throughout the league as opposed to putting them all on one team. It would require, though, the Ignite or the other G League teams to buy in the way that we haven't necessarily seen yet at this point, and we don't know if they would over the other prospects on their roster.
So how would that work? You would just say like, okay, we're going to bring in 5 a year, the first 5 teams alphabetically. You're going to get these 5 guys this year, the next 5 teams are up, and you kind of just put them randomly, or would there be a strategic aspect to it of maybe where a kid's from, or the kid has a say in it a little bit, something like that?
Yeah. I don't have an answer on that. Just to be completely honest with you. I think it'd be like it'd be just almost more dependent on like the team buying in and being
maybe
like,
some
hey,
teams would opt out of it, right? Like some teams would be like, no, we don't want anything to do with that, while others would embrace it.
And like, honestly, like, Brian Singleton brings up like the shenanigans for a team when they like a prospect on their own team. The idea here would be like the teams that take these players would have an intel advantage on the other teams, and like theoretically could shut them down if they really like them, or, could, they should maybe like make rules for they have to play X number of games, and you have to make them available for X number of teams, etc. Like you can do things like that, but uh that would be the inherent advantage, is like getting the intel, like Alan Smilekeach, as Dirty Dancer brings up in the YouTube comments, like the Warriors did when they had Smilekeach as like a draft eligible player.
Well, the other thing is like you would probably sell some more tickets, right? Like if you have Ron Holland playing on your G League team, especially if you're one of the Texas teams, you're going to sell more tickets to those games. Like there's going to be more eyes on your G League team, which like maybe it's not a huge positive, but I don't know. Like I feel like there's some sort of positivity to that. Maybe even the other guys on the team are getting a little more recognition whenever they play well. Even though people are coming to watch or whatever, Ron Holland, there's more like, to me, I want to pick a G League team that has Ron Holland on it if I'm trying to get to the NBA, because I know, what I know? There's going to be NBA scouts at every single one of our G League games if I'm playing on a team with Ron Holland. So sign me, agent, put me on that team, because I'm going to play with Ron Holland and I'm going to get him 12, I'm going to get 12 assists a night, getting him the ball where he needs to go. And there's going to be a scout in the stands every single one of our games.
Dead on. I think that's a great way to finish up. Okay. Last thing we wanted to do, second half predictions, right?
Man. Yep.
So you came up with the idea of us doing one bold second half prediction. I might make this like an additional episode this week, maybe with you, maybe with somebody else. We'll see. What is your one bold second half prediction? It's funny. You listed one of mine.
Did I really?
Yeah.
So I listed 4 just because I always like to be over prepared. I feel like I don't homer too much here. So I'm going to homer tonight because it's 11:30 and I just want to. The Detroit Pistons will not finish with the worst record in the NBA. And
this was mine.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want me to change it?
This was actually mine.
I can go with I can go with one of the other ones.
Go ahead. No, do this one. I'll go with one of the other ones.
Okay.
But this was actually mine. And I want to I'll slightly change one on my end.
Okay.
But this is a great prediction in my opinion.
So they're only 1 game back of the Wizards right now, and like 2.5 back of the Spurs. They play the Wizards one time, end of March. They play the Spurs the last game of the season. Over the last 15 games, the Pistons are actually 19th in net. The Wizards and Spurs are 26th and 27th respectively. The Spurs have the second hardest strength of schedule left. The Wizards 11th, the Pistons 13th. That's via Tankathon. That's only calculating win percentage. So I'm sure there's some more advanced ones out there that have road back-to-back stuff like that. So I just went with kind of the basic one there. I feel like the Pistons roster makes a little more sense. I'm not saying they're going to win a ton of games, but it makes a little bit of sense. Ivy has been playing better. Hopefully Cunningham will come back from the All-Star break and play better. They have that losing streak behind them where I think we all can imagine what kind of weight that had on them. Monte Williams, lineup construction and rotations are a little bit not as frustrating. Quentin Grimes get healthy. I think that makes a lot of sense. I just think the roster makes more sense in general. I'm not saying they're going to go 500 after the All-Star break. I think they win enough games not to be the worst team in the league by the end of the season.
Yeah, this was mine. I love this
I'm
one.
sorry.
I think that they look competent. I think that they are incentivized after the way that this thing started to not look like a total fucking catastrophe.
Agreed.
The rest of the way. Like, I really think that they care and like want to build the right habits, and they're close enough to where like they're close enough to the Wizards. They're close enough to the Hornets, close enough to the Spurs. Even I don't think they'll catch the Trailblazers, because like the Blazers are also kind of sneaky competitive right now, like in a real way, in a way that like I really appreciate. So I think they probably finished like 3rd worst record in the league, but I don't think that they finish with the worst record. That was my take as well.
And the thing is, like, there truly is no reason for them to tank. Like, there just isn't any reason for them. Like, we've talked about this. If Victor was in this draft, I don't think I would have this same take, because my take would be you didn't lose 28 games in a row or whatever to not then have the best potential. I mean, it still wouldn't be the best at getting him, I guess, but to have the best odds possible to stay as high. And like, at the end of the day, yes, you want to be able there at 1 to take the guy you want, but I don't think that that's going to be on their mind. They have these young guys. And like you said, if you can go not be the worst team in the league this year, have a decent end to the season, maybe you get rid of the stink of that losing streak just a little bit and build some sort of positive momentum that this organization, Troy Weaver and Monte Williams really, really need. Because the thing is, Troy Weaver made a lot of moves, Sam. He could really use some of these looking like smart moves over the last 2 months of the season to build some confidence into decisions he'll make in this offseason. So I think that, like you said, they're very incentivized to go win some games here.
I agree. Mine is that if the Clippers stay healthy, if they get Kawhi and Paul George to maintain their health through the playoffs, the Clippers win the West.
Win playoffs. Represent the West. I love it.
They win the West.
I love it.
I don't know if they're going to be able to stay healthy. Like that's a real factor here, and we'll find out if they're going to be able to. But every time I watch them, they're the most complete team that I watch on a night-to-night basis. They have been fantastic this year. I love the way that their offense looks. That's always been the critical piece of it, in my opinion, is oftentimes their offense gets a little bit stagnant and looks a little bit gross. But with Harden playing point guard and like being willing to take a step back as a point guard, I think that is the biggest factor in them being able to really go for it. They've often had like a good offensive team, but man, I think they have really been able to fix that issue since Harden has been there. I think they look awesome on the offensive side of the floor now. And to me, they are the team that I would be most worried about playing in the playoffs at this point. And when you have Kawhi and Paul George, you can go out and get all sorts of great shot making in critical moments in tough playoff settings. I think Kawhi has been
awesome,
a top 3 guy in the league this year. If we remove Joel, because Joel is going to miss half the season now, it seems like Kawhi has been absolutely unbelievable. He's played 48 games. Paul George has played 50 games. I love what I've seen from Norman Powell. Norman Powell's averaging 13 points a game on 50, 45, 85 this year. Terrence Mann has been pretty solid, even though he hasn't shot the ball particularly well yet. I just love everything that they bring. I think that they are tough, and we'll see if they can get anything done, potentially like some sort of buyout that's below the mid-level number or anything like that. I think the Clippers are really good, and people keep bringing up like Denver wins the West. Clippers have no size, right? I think that's reasonable, but I think Zubats can at least make Jokic work for it. I'm not saying he's going to stop him. Like there's no stopping Nikola Jokic, but Zubats is at least like tough enough and physical enough to where Jokic can't like bully him down onto the block every time and get easy shots. Like I think that Jokic will probably still score, like he'll probably go for 25, 12 and 10 in that series or something crazy, but he might be a little bit less efficient doing so. And, I think Zubats is at least tough enough to make it harder for him. We'll see if that's plausible.
Listen, I'm not going to discount the reigning champs and Nikola Jokic because
neither am I. Like they'd be my number 2 pick right now. Like I think they are spectacular. But and honestly, like if you made me pick one team that I think is most likely to, I don't know if I trust the Clippers to stay healthy.
Yeah.
So end of the day, if I had to pick one team to win the title right now, without the health caveat, I would probably pick the Nuggets. But I think if the Clippers stay healthy, which is an enormous caveat, I really love what they've been able to do over the course of recent times.
And we've said from the beginning of the season that maybe there's a question about the Nuggets depth. And I think that's shown through the regular season so far. So it'll be interesting. And I realize like maybe they're not taking the regular season super serious. I looked this up because I did not think this Clippers team was going to be one that I really believed in and all of that. And I find them fascinating since the 5-game losing streak that started the Harden era. So we all know they lost the first 5, 33-10, first in offensive rating, 12th in defensive rating, 6th in net over that 43 game sample size. They're currently just, 2 games back of the Timberwolves and a half game back of the Thunder in the Western Conference standings. Like it's going to be interesting. This Western Conference, man, is fascinating because you could have Minnesota and OKC as the 1 and 2 playing against the Lakers and the Warriors in the first round. Is it legitimately, that's what we could end up with. And that would also put right now, if it was today, it would be Nuggets Suns first round in the 4-5 game. And then I guess you couldn't get the Lakers and the Warriors in because they would play each other in the tournament to start the play-in tournament. But, depending on how the standings shake out, man, can you imagine those first round matchups for the Timberwolves and the Thunder? Hey, you get the 1 and the 2 seed, welcome the LeBron and AD Lakers, or, the Warriors have figured a few things out. So it'll be interesting, man. This Western Conference is crazy, where the Eastern Conference, it seems like there's a little bit of gap between Boston and everybody else.
Yeah. And I mean, like if you're the 3 seed and you're the Clippers, it's probably relatively unlikely that you play the Nuggets in the second round, right? Like you would probably get one of the Timberwolves or Thunder, I think, given like you have the Kings in Dallas but man, Dallas, I'll say this, man, Dallas looks good. I don't know about.
Oh yeah, sure. I didn't mean to overlook them. Yeah.
Dallas might be tough.
Yeah.
Dallas might be a tough out in the playoffs, if I'm being honest. And I'm going on a podcast tomorrow and talking a little bit about contenders. So I'm excited to do that. Won't be on this show. I'll tweet it out tomorrow as soon as it happens. But yeah, I think the Clippers are really good. I think they are absolutely a legit title contender. Like my top tier right now is Nuggets, Clippers, Boston. And at the end of the day, if the Clippers can stay healthy, they'd be my pick.
Yeah, no, I think I'm with you. And again, like I didn't think I was going to be here. I don't even know that I loved the idea of the Harden trade before it happened. I was kind of, whatever, taking my victory lap silently whenever they lost their first 5 games with him. And they have shut me and everybody else up since. Again, it's all about health. And, they still have, 30 more games to figure it out. And, they've only played, what did I say there? Would that be 43 games so far? That's a lot. That's a substantial size, Sam, but they still have more things they can figure out too, right? So they have more season to get better than what we have even seen. So that West is going to be awesome. But yeah, I think the Clippers, if healthy, have as good a chance. I don't know if as good a chance as anybody, but I sure think they do. So
yeah, I agree. Okay, Bryce. That's what we've got for the show tonight. Anything you got to get off your chest before we go?
No, I think that's it. I got a couple others that if we do this again, I'll save them for that. But
love it.
We got a few days here, no NBA. So I got a couple players that I haven't. Brandon Carlson at Utah is a player I need to go watch. So I have some film on him. I got another kid I need to watch a little bit more. I watched that Colorado USC game today. Have you watched that one live, right?
I did not. No.
Have you watched it at all yet? Oh,
not even a second of it.
Okay. You need to watch that. Let me know. So I'm excited. My point being where I was going was I'm excited just to focus on just like college hoops here. Maybe check out Alex Sarr's game from this weekend, and without any NBA game distractions, I can just kind of focus on NBA draft stuff. So
yeah, I'm excited to do draft stuff like all day tomorrow. It's going to be great. Bryce, it's been great to have you on the show. This has been the Game Theory Podcast. Please remember, rate, review, subscribe. Go over to YouTube, subscribe there. Go over to the podcast provider that you use. Listen there. Bryce, tell the people where they can find your work.
Yeah, at Motor City Hoops on Twitter. If you're a Pistons fan, the Pistons Pulse podcast. Otherwise, here at Game Theory with you, talking NBA draft. I appreciate it.
Love it. This has been the Game Theory Podcast. We will be back on Thursday, Friday, something like that. Until next time, though, we'll talk soon. Bye.